Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special show. We're not on Thursdays, but don't look at your calendar because it's Thursday.
Hmm.
We used to be on Thursdays, but we are now moving to Tuesdays. So on Tuesdays, you'll see challenges of the C suite, you'll see workplace equity, you'll see everything under the sun. Most important, you're going to see CB Bowman, right? And when you see me, it means, oh gosh, I forgot to polish my nails. Oh well, I'll put my hands down. Okay. It means that I have an incredible guest for you. And today we have Layla. She's with Amazon. Watch out now. We're going to get the inside scoop about our favorite store. I don't want to mislead. You guys know I have two favorite stores. I bet you know what they are by now. Costco and Amazon. That's it. Boy, do I wish I could afford stock at Amazon. So, with that, we're going to talk to Layla, who has a special role in Amazon, and that's in the DEI space: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, without further ado, let me introduce Layla. Layla,
Hello.
how are you?
Hello, CB. So good to see you and so great to be here. I am so well and so blessed to be here to speak with you today. I'm glad to be
You
here.
know, um, I have to watch my P's and Q's because she's part of the young blood, right? That means she's smart
Hmm.
and we have to just learn from her. Okay, Layla, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
Yes. I mean, that's such a loaded question. I always like to start by saying that when folks ask, Layla, where are you from? Tell us about yourself. It's a loaded question. So, I am someone who identifies as Afro Latina. I am of Dominican roots. I am from New York. I also spent a considerable amount of time in Boston. And essentially, we grew up, my parents, I'm first generation. And so my parents are from Dominican Republic. And so a lot of the similar, sort of like some of the stories that you hear and the experiences are my own as well. And so I come from, coming from New York, great education. I went to an all women's college. I went to, HBS for business school, Harvard Business School for folks who don't know the acronym. And education has really just been the sort of like my ticket and how I've been able to see the world and experience the world and really navigate opportunities beyond what my parents even dreamed of. And so I like to start off there, right, by saying that I'm from Dominican roots, and then also like education is core. In
So
terms of
wait. Too fast, too fast.
okay,
Tell us
okay, tell me to
what
slow down. I'm also a New Yorker and the Spanish speaker in me. Okay,
I love it. I'm going to talk to you about some food later, right?
yes,
Okay. We'll
yes.
compare
My
black
favorite
and
pastime is
Latino.
eating. Let's
Okay, we're
go.
ready. Okay. What did your parents do?
So my mom is an educator, and then my dad, I like to refer to him as a serial entrepreneur. And
Love it.
so, yeah, so both of them were incredibly like high on. We gotta make sure that our kids are. I have one brother and then three half brothers, and so education, like all of us, are well into our careers, different interests and different disciplines, but education is at the forefront. And I'm sure this is not new. You hear this all the time with folks who come from my background as well.
Well, not so much, but
Mhm.
I love the mix of the education push and the entrepreneurship.
Oh, yes,
I
yes,
love the combination.
yes.
And so an all girls school,
Hmm.
where was the
Yes.
school?
So I went to Smith College, and it was in Western Massachusetts, and that was my introduction into what, well, not the school itself where it was, but like what rural America felt like. And I'm grateful for the experience. I have a lot of respect for people who come from places that are not like the city. And so yeah, so it was a great experience. It was, I think without Smith College, I wouldn't necessarily be as, I would say, fierce, outspoken, and just, I would say, I mean, I like to say unbothered really about what folks think about my ideas and the way that I see the world. And so
Well,
That's
here's
a
the
credit
thing
to that
that's
institution.
interesting about what you said. So I want to clarify it for
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Smith may be in a rural part of the country, but it produces some kick-ass women.
Oh
So
yeah,
I want to make
that
sure
is
you
without a doubt.
understand where you're going with this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say that I wasn't necessarily familiar with Smith College when I was applying for college. I applied to like 10 different schools. And I asked one of my mentors at the time, well, I feel like I'd never heard of Smith. What is this? And she responded by letting me know the people who know. And so that's just a call to action, right? For folks who don't know Smith College, listen, you've been missing out.
I love that. Who is this mentor? I love
This
this.
is this is one of the women that I came across in one of my early internship programs that I did. So once upon a time, I wanted to be an attorney, and so this is one of the women who was managing the program at a law firm that I worked at.
Okay, so let's go. You skipped some important stuff here. So you wanted to be what? Okay, how did you come to wanting to be an attorney, and what side of law did you want to practice in?
Yeah, so that is it's a curious question because your environment reflects so much back of you to you, and
Yeah.
so I was very inquisitive. I hesitate to say argumentative. I was more I always had a perspective,
Curious.
right?
You were curious.
Curious, and I had a perspective, right? And I also didn't
Curious,
stop
and you
at
had courage. You had a lot of
yeah,
courage, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And my mom encouraged that, right? I was one of those kids who asked the five whys, and she didn't have to answer the question, but she nurtured that curiosity in a way that made other people feel like, well, Layla, you ask all these questions and you always have an opinion. Maybe you should be an attorney because you argue so much. and and so I started thinking about it, and that was really the beginning of it. But then over time, and I learned through the internships that I did. So I worked at two law firms early, like I would say even before my career actually started. This was like one in high school, one in college, and I learned that I really didn't necessarily want to read case law, and that I really didn't care to do all the reading that you have to do in law school to get through. And so that sort of turned me off. And then also it was very like from a cultural standpoint in the law firms, not to knock on any of these law firms or any of these places. I think from a cultural standpoint, I was going to be potentially problematic because I wasn't just necessarily willing to fall in line. And
And
if I thought that something needed to be addressed, then I would ask about it. So
I love how you word
I had to switch paths. Yeah.
awesome. And so you identified a mentor at that time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have tons. I mean, not tons. I like to say I have a good solid, like, I would say between 10 and 15 relationships. Some of those that, I've had since I was like 17. And
Wow.
these people are still in my life. And even if we're not sort of like in the same career path, like my conversations around whether I need to transition or go to business school or if I should quit a job start with, understanding what their perspectives are. And then ultimately I formulate my own view. But
Yeah.
you need the data points, right? You need to, I know that I know that I don't know as much as, other people know. So,
Layla, can I ask you? I never asked this question, but how
yeah.
old are you?
Oh, I am 34. I'm so glad that I remembered because yesterday I forgot. Someone asked me if I was like, yeah, so I had to think about it. So yeah, I'm 34. Yeah.
Okay, you look like you're
Proudly.
24 or
Yeah,
younger.
it's
Uh,
because my hair is up. I think if my hair was down and it looked like the way it looks on my LinkedIn profile, that maybe, you get a different feel. But my hair has a personality of its own also. So sometimes you gotta get creative about taming it.
I love your wisdom. You know, one of my friends, a colleague of mine, Dory Clark,
Mhm.
who's all over LinkedIn and et cetera, et cetera. Um, she put out a blog post early this week about the importance of having a board of mentors, not just one. And you actually practice what she's preaching. And I
Oh,
love it.
absolutely. And I tell everyone who'll hear me out that like this is the way to go. And I should say just for context, right? Because I think you don't just like wake up one day and you've got these people like ready to roll. It was out of an abundance of respect and awareness, right? Of the fact that my parents hadn't been to the places that I had gone, and that they weren't necessarily, that I wasn't navigating paths that they had experience with, in addition to other folks that came into my life. And so it was out of an awareness of how I'm going to call it how under resourced and how under connected I was as early as 15, right? That I said, well, I have to make sure that I continue these relationships. And it's something that my dad and my mom were both very, they impressed upon me, that building and managing and nurturing relationships is critical, because ultimately, your experiences, your life is influenced not just by your own, but also by the experiences and the reach of other folks, right? And so I had plans to go places in my life, and so I knew that relationships had to be critical and core to how I got there. So kudos and shout outs to all my mentors and those who who have helped along the way. I definitely am standing on the shoulder of giants.
And how do you go about selecting your mentors?
Oh man, I would say it's like an art and a science. I think some of my friends might say that I'm a little more calculated. I like to say strategic and thoughtful and intentional. But calculated was the first word that people came before we knew about the nuanced intentional, right? It was calculated. I would say the first is it starts more naturally from the perspective of, if there's someone who, so my sort of like longest mentorship relationship is this person who I met again at a law firm, and he's known me since I was 16, right? And so that relationship he was assigned to me as a mentor, but I knew that, whether the relationship persisted beyond that was dependent on me and whether I could be of value and vice versa. And so the selection sometimes is structured in the sense that it's been a part of a particular program. It's been an educator that I respect tremendously and who I'm happy to do extra work for or with. It's been people who have had a timely message at a time where I wasn't willing to hear it from someone else and had the courage to just say, hey, look, this is something that you need to consider. And it's also just been folks who have said, hey, look, I want to invest in you and your success. Reach out to me if there's anything that I could be of service. And then I actually do reach out. And so it's, when I say that it's like an art and a science, the science of it is having a direction, right? And being clear on where you want to go. And then asking yourself, well, what people are connected to those places, to those spaces, have an awareness and a knowledge of those environments. And then strategically finding ways to connect, right? And, social media and LinkedIn and these sorts of platforms are really great for that. But like when we used to be in person, it was really going places that were new and where you knew that the people who, for example, if you're someone who really enjoys art, chances are, if you're going frequently to museums and art festivals and galleries, you're going to meet like-minded individuals who can help you get there. And so for me, it's just been really strategic about where I show up so that I can meet people who can help me along my way and vice versa.
And so you've brought up so many good points. One of those is people that you can help, give back to.
Yep.
And so how do you find out what help they need? And have you ever been in a state of concern that you would not have the right thing to give back?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So how to find out is really, so one of the things I think is important to just say up front is that I am, and again, credit to my parents and my family and all the folks who have encouraged me to just be myself. I am someone who at the beginning of like starting a relationship, like I create and make as much space for myself as possible. And so it's not uncommon.
What do you mean by that?
It's not uncommon for me to go into a first interaction with someone and to say things like, I'm a bit more introverted and reserved. And therefore, if I pause after you ask a question, it's because I'm actually thinking about it. And I also say things like, I'm insatiably curious. So if I ask 2 and 3 questions at a time, it's because I really do want to know all those questions. And I will pause as soon as I'm done just to hear the answers to all of them. And so because of that, I also tell people that, typically I'll say, I give you, you have my full permission to tell me about myself in whatever way is most comfortable for you at any point, and to give me that feedback. And then I'm going to ask some questions, and you always have you can always pass on anything that you don't want to answer. No judgment, no follow-up questions asked, right? With that being the case, right, it's very, I think, disarming for people. And it's also inviting in the sense that then now they feel like they can bring more of themselves to the conversation. And once we are sort of like comfortable, then it's just about really asking the questions that naturally are of interest. And for me, I care like deeply and tremendously about people. I'm always on the side of like the underdog, and always whoever is, needs an advocate and is fighting the good fight. And so those are my people. And so I know that that asking about the person is just as important as asking about their interests. And so it's always a balance for me, getting to know people through their interests, by asking follow-up questions around like, well, what was your intention behind that? And where do your thoughts go when I ask about this? And or when you see, when you think 5 years ahead, what's the story that you want to be able to be told about you? And so asking these, and I also should say, like, I'm a coach, I'm a certified coach. So I've gotten better in asking questions like that. But that's really how I uncover what people need. Really, it's just listening, not just to what they say, but also how they say it and where the energy is.
When you interview somebody to be your mentor, what's the first question you ask?
Well, it's funny because I don't necessarily do interviews, and sometimes I just stumble into these conversations. But if I had to, right, taking a step back, let me think about that. I would ask, I'd probably ask something along the lines of, what keeps you up at night? Mm-hmm. And then based on that, they would, that gives you a sense of some of the things that, it gives you a sense of what their values might be. It gives you a sense of where some of the challenges are. And then, from there, it's just a question of, it's really, you're sort of like figuring out as you go. But I think that question is really insightful. And then also a really important question that I've been asking a lot more since, I became certified as a coach is, what gives you energy? Because ultimately, I would want to be aligned to the things that energize people. I don't want to be a drain on people's energy. So,
what would you ask them? What did you ask them before you became a coach?
Oh man, I think if I can be self-critical, right? I think a lot of the questions were about how they started with a how do I, right? It was like, how do I get here? How did you get there? So those sorts of questions about like, how did they navigate their path and how should I approach navigating mine? It was also a lot of questions around.
I'm sorry, how should you approach what?
Navigating my own journey, right? One of the things that I think has been really impactful in these discussions is seeing essentially like people introduce themselves differently depending on how you frame the question. And so I often will say things like, I'm coming into this conversation. I didn't read your bio. I didn't look you up on LinkedIn because I want to hear the story from you, how you would tell it. So tell me what's important, right? Introduce yourself with whatever you think is most important and relevant to you. So that is a better question that I asked, whereas before it was just, tell me a little bit about yourself. So the questions are like, I would say smarter questions now than perhaps before. They were just like, what you could find on Google easily.
I think that the questions you asked before are stronger than the questions you're asking now as a coach.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, as a coach, it's different, right? As a coach, it's different. But, in terms of getting to know people, I think as a coach, the shorter questions that start with what are much better, right? Then because and then you just let people go. They'll go wherever they need to go in terms of that. So as a coach, it's a different framing of questions and thought process.
Yeah, I think that the questions you asked before got you to where you are now, and that's incredibly successful. And you're right, as a coach, you ask different questions, but I would be careful not to use your coaching questions with people that you want to support your journey.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely received. Yep.
Yeah. And so I didn't mean to go into coaching mode just now.
Oh, no, that's good. Listen, y'all. Remember I said people who had a timely message at the right time? That was one of them. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And so tell me about why you went down the coaching road. Why did you get certified as a coach?
So, the journey or the questions that I started asking questions about becoming a coach really because I'm the friend that people came to for advice. I'm the friend that people came to think strategically about, well, how should I play this? And so from there, I I forged a path into a career that really, and by this career, I mean, inclusion, diversity, and equity. I forged a path that really was about people and getting beneath the surface about people, understanding their motivations and understanding how to change behavior. Right? We used to say like changing hearts and minds. We can't really change people's hearts and minds. We can just help them be more intentional. And so because of that, there was a lot of work around coaching C-level executives when I was in my first job in inclusion, diversity, and equity. And I really just wanted to be good at what I was doing. I wanted to make sure that I was of service and that I was having a lasting impact. And so the coaching as a formal part of my role started then. And the training and certification really was just sort of closing the loop, right? And getting some tools, better language underneath my belt, and ultimately being able to earn the certification so that, there's like in the coaching profession, we want to make sure that there's a standard that folks are upholding as they become coaches. And so furthering that as well.
Mm-hmm. And so tell us about your role at Amazon.
Oh, yes. My role at Amazon changes every day. It's great. I am a senior program manager on the inclusion, diversity, and equity team. And these days, the focus of my work is on onboarding programs, and this is as of a few months, and so I'm still coming up to speed there. But generally speaking, I like to think of myself as like an advocate, right? A corporate advocate with a strategic mindset that's ready to interrupt mechanisms and interrupt systems and replace, and where there aren't any, essentially introduce new ones to help drive equity, inclusion, and diversity. And that's my work is focused mainly on developing programs that could help us achieve those ends. And right now it's really for example in onboarding, and prior to that it was really trying to understand how we could meet the needs of our Latinx population as they were navigating different levels of their career. So with
So your position is more internally focused versus externally focused.
Yes. And we have, our team is growing. We've got folks who are external facing in terms of helping to drive, creating pipelines of talent, pipelines of technicians across the globe through community activations. And we've got folks who are working with our customers in particular, right, to drive inclusion metrics and messaging across their platforms as well. So, I'm more in-house. Yes.
How does that work, actually? Because people like myself think of Amazon as a store. Okay. And so are you talking about changing? Well, we know you're more than a store, but generally speaking, the category is retail, right?
Yes. Well, I'm glad that you asked that question because it's an important clarification here, right? So Amazon.com, which is what you and I know as the, what brings the boxes with the smiley faces to our doorsteps, right? That's the retail side. I am in Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud service provider. And so I can speak for what we're doing on the AWS side a lot better than I can speak for what the .com side is doing. That team is much larger and a bit removed. But essentially, when we think the working with communities is happening a lot through partnerships, right? So on both ends, right, broadly speaking, at a big picture, at a big high level, we're working with customers and through customers, working with partners and through partners to essentially move the needle and push further the agenda around inclusion, diversity, and equity, right? So wherever there's a captive audience, wherever there is an opportunity for us to set the agenda or to deliver some messaging around why this is critical and important, that's where we're showing up.
So what I was going to ask you, young lady, was how does Amazon ensure through its algorithms on the retail side that it is including DEI?
Oh, wow. So just to take a step back, right? So at Amazon, right, we are like customer obsessed, right? And so what's important to our customers, we are taking that and baking that into the way that we work and the things that we do. So to address that particular question, like I don't think that I'm the right person to answer that question because we're talking about algorithms and the tech specifically. And so I'm a bit removed from that. But I can assure you that we have our leadership teams are behind trying to have these essentially impact the work that we do at every step of the way and have that trickle down to all the different teams and all the different products that we're working on. And so it's a work in progress, and it's top of mind. But I can't necessarily speak to the technology. I wish I could, or speak to the algorithm. That's like not in my wheelhouse.
So I've noticed on commercials for Amazon, you're doing work to, and this may be outside of your area too, but I'm sure you're aware of the commercials. There seems to be a link towards, or an effort to move towards educating, talking about education and DEI. The messages are not quite clear to me, and I come out of marketing. And so, what's going on there?
Well, I can speak for on the AWS side of things. On the education piece, when we think about the next economy, if you will, and the talent that we'll need, and the opportunities and the problems that'll be before us, there's a need to develop a pipeline of folks who are familiar with the technologies and who are familiar with some of these challenges. And so the education is so critical, right? When we think about some of the disparities across, our nation and across the globe, it's folks who have an understanding of these particular needs and these particular opportunities that are going to be able to bring the solutions. And so the degree that we can communicate, here is something that you should sort of know about, and then here is Amazon showing up to help further that education, then we are positioning ourselves as a partner to all those who in the future may want to join in on driving ID&E or driving education as we think about how, the cloud is going to change the world, right? And our CEO often says that this is really just the beginning. And so we've got a long way to go. And so we need folks to really beef up the education and really ignite those flames around solving some of these more complex, nuanced challenges so that we can ultimately achieve, being Earth's best company and Earth's best employer, right? So that's what we're after.
I like where you're going. I love where Amazon is going. I think that the message needs to be clearer from somebody on the outside. Because I look at that and I say to myself, what are they trying to say here? Are they trying to, I know it's education. It seems to be education for young kids, to derive that thought, but I'm not quite sure where they're going with this ad. And that's a hard message to make sure it's really clear. And it's a very, very important message.
Yeah.
Very important. I love that Amazon is taking that road because coming from marketing, from the big guys, I was with General Foods and Kraft, I saw so many opportunities where the company itself could help move the next generations in terms of education and not dumbing it down in terms of cartoons or what the delivery about the food itself. We're starting to see a much better representation now. But that's why I particularly like the way that Amazon is going, but the message needs to be a little bit clearer. And so that we can give credit to Amazon for the direction that they're going in.
Yeah.
So tell me, what made you decide to go with Amazon as a company? What drew you to them?
So I should say that I'm someone who I think of my life and career as like a collection of experiments. And so there's always a question that I'm trying to answer. And there's like so much more, there's a lot more unknown than there is known. I just typically have like a conviction about a specific thing. And so the journey here really was, so I'm someone who I grew up in business, right? I was on Wall Street for 4 years. And at the time, coming from humble beginnings, the question before me was, well, Layla, you can make yourself more wealthy and you can make your clients more wealthy. Sure. You know how to do that now. But is that what you want your life to be
You're
about?
hired. Wait a second. You're hired.
Thank you. So the thought is, I could do this forever, but also, is this what I want my life to be about? And the answer was no. And I essentially quit Wall Street and decided that I was going to figure out what I cared about more. And what it was really making an impact and driving some of the changes that I thought needed to happen in my community. And so I did some work at a nonprofit organization And then during that time, this nonprofit organization is called Management Leadership for Tomorrow, which I drink all the Kool-Aid. I work there and also have been a participant in their programs. And it's really, I mean, this organization is changing. I like to say helping to change the complexion of corporate America, right? So connecting early talent as well as early mid-career and executive level talent to fast track opportunities to excel and advance in their careers. And so having done that, that was sort of my first introduction into inclusion work. And then I went to business school.
What's the name of the company again, the organization?
Management Leadership for Tomorrow. It's a career development nonprofit, I should say. Sorry, it's a career development nonprofit. And so so from there, one of their programs is a business school focused one, where essentially, they're helping you figure out how to apply to business school and ultimately how to get in. And so I applied and wound up, accepting an admissions offer to Harvard Business School. And at Harvard, the question for me was, it was a burning desire. I felt like I needed to be where the strategy was taking shape in relation to how inclusion, diversity, and equity was unfolding. And I interned with a company that's called Danaher Corporation in a talent acquisition project for the summer. And then my boss at the time, God bless her.
Well, audience, it seems that we froze a little bit here. It could be because of the snowstorms that are happening, but I'm sure Layla will come back on. Meantime, thank you, Lisa. You wrote in later, you are inspirational, isn't she? Would you speak to your role at Amazon Web Services, and specifically, would you give us an example of how you might disrupt a process?
Okay, we are back.
Okay, so I was just reading a comment that came in.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So, there's two questions I want to ask you. One is, why did you select Harvard versus a historically Black university? And two, a question from Lisa, who's saying, Layla, you are inspirational, isn't she? I love it.
Oh, thank you. I received that. Thank you so much.
She says, would you speak to your role at Amazon Web Services? And specifically, would you give us an example of how you might disrupt a process in onboarding to ensure DEI happens? Thank you. I wanted to ask that, and it went from my mind. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay. So where should we start? Let's take them one at a time.
Take the first one about your selection for school.
Okay. So the selection of the school, that process was a fairly drawn out one, in the sense that having gone through the MLT program, you are applying to schools that you are a fit for. So that means you're meeting the GMAT requirements, and you're also meeting the GPA requirements and all that. And then there's reach schools, and then there's just schools that you're interested in. HBS was actually the last school that I prepared an application for, and I wasn't planning to attend HBS. But when the admissions offers came back, it was what really did it for me was that I was focused on how could I drive impact in the social sector. And they had an incredible initiative that really said to me, this is where these are my people, right? And so that was the decision for me. But it was, I was in a group of 250 other people applying to business school at the same time. Thankfully, I had a cohort of 250 and I had a class of 250 and a cohort of 40 people who I was closer to. We were all in DC at that time with the same coach. And ultimately it came down to, HBS was hitting the nail on the head in terms of, investing in the areas where I was most interested in working, making sure that I was going to have all the resources that I needed from an education standpoint to succeed. And then ultimately, it comes down to the network, right? I'd be lying to you if I said to you that I didn't consider, how the network would work or not work for me. And HBS is one of the oldest of the MBA programs that exist, if not the oldest. And so it just made sense, right? So it was purely, I would say, an algorithm. I plugged numbers in. I plugged numbers into, weight things, and HBS won.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, now Lisa's question. You want me to repeat that?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to repeat the best part. You are inspirational.
Thank you.
Would you, that draws a question. Are you mentoring anyone? So I'll
Of
ask that
course.
next.
Yes. Let's get into it.
Would you speak to your role at Amazon? And specifically, would you give us an example of how you might disrupt a process in onboarding to ensure D&I happens?
Yes. So great question. And I can give you at least one, the most sort of like relatable example that I have. When we think about what our onboarding experiences are coming into a specific organization, we've got the compliance videos and we've got videos that tell us here's the company, here's the culture. And we've got folks who we have one-on-ones with. When we think about disrupting mechanisms or systems, for me, one of the programs that I'm going to be launching is one that's going to tailor some of those onboarding plans to the specific needs of folks from different demographics, right? And so if that is, I need to connect with someone who can really tell me what it's like to be a Latina here, then it's going to be making sure that we're establishing those meaningful connections. So if it's going to be, I want to get a sense for which particular affinity groups are available and how to plug into being able to do some of the impactful work. Then it's making sure that it's almost like I'm brokering, introducing these people to some of the more nuanced aspects of Amazon or AWS that will speak to their experience and help them to develop more meaningful connections and establish themselves a lot faster, right? So get the more included we feel, the more reflected and respected we feel, the more likely we are to contribute at a higher degree, and that's across demographics, across all people. And so it's really just about beefing that up because a system can be built to be to do the job, but you need human intervention to be able to do that job well in a way that speaks to a specific person. And so it's taking a more nuanced approach.
I love how you are actually educating the people informing the people within Amazon about where they can resource people of color and how to resource them. I'm so tired of organizations saying, I can't find anybody. How do I do that? It's so clear. It's so easy. It's not difficult. It's figuring out where you can connect. Exactly. And this concept of the the Great Resignation. It's like employers are just all of a sudden waking up because they have to. They're waking up to the fact that it's now become the employees' world. We've shifted in a volcanic eruption that employees have a choice. And the choice is I'm going to select somebody who represents my color. I'm going to choose somebody who represents my values and who can pay me what I'm asking. It boggles my mind that this is a new concept in life.
It is. Yeah.
And so
it's a new day.
It as a result, you have this escape from the organizations that they have thought of, that employees have thought of as my home. COVID has helped so many people realize that they are in the wrong place at this time in their lives. So I see that we have people coming in by YouTube from other countries, and welcome them. Now let's go back to who are you mentoring?
Oh yeah. I mean, the list is I would say similarly to like my first mentor, like the one that was assigned to me, I have one mentee who is like, I think she's gonna save my career as I think about how I want to elevate and go. And so we've been in a mentor-mentee relationship for like over 10 years. So that's sort of like the one that I think of. Like I take my my cues from listening to what she needs and to showing up in the ways that she needs me to show up for her. So there's her. I'm mentoring through MLT, right? So Management Leadership for Tomorrow, that organization that I mentioned. There are folks who are trying to get to business school. There are folks who are trying to get into these fast track jobs or careers. And so I'm mentoring folks who are trying to navigate, how do I show up as my best self? And then as we think about this generation of talent, because these are younger folks, as we think about this generation of talent, one of the things that inspires me the most about them is that they're not here for it. They're not here for what your best is necessarily. They're here for, I see you on your best and here's what I expect, and I'm willing to walk away. And so I think they're challenging us to really step up our game. There are also a bunch of folks that come across my sort of desk in terms of, needing some guidance and support from my personal networks. So anyone who, I don't know how, right? I became the person that folks call when they have questions relating to HR. How do I navigate this tense situation, right? Then there are folks who
are got to be that person.
Pardon?
I'll tell you how you got to be that person.
Okay. So there are those folks, and then there are also, pardon?
I'll tell you how.
Okay.
Humility, smarts, and credibility.
There you have it. I'm gonna write that down. So yeah. So it's, they're all over. I really, I have a mentor, right? And I take a lot of my cues on who I am as a mentor from, I'm a product of great mentorship. And so I essentially pay it forward, and I do the things that my mentors did with me, and I don't do the things that they didn't do with me. And so one of my mentors, very early on was, very clear about the fact that, like, he says yes to everyone. Anyone who reaches out and there's something that he can do to help, he is there, or at least he'll take the call. And so I take the call, right? I make the time, I make the space, I block time in my calendar to make sure that I can do this because it's important to me. And so I take that from that mentor. And then he also is someone who there's no pressure, right? I like to make sure that, as a mentee, as a sponsor, as an advocate, as an advisor, that you feel energy when you're speaking, when you're connecting with me, and not that you feel drained. I don't want it to feel like this is a job. So there's a very open, reach out to me when you need. I'll send you a one-line message like, hey, how are you doing? Just to check in. If it's a one-word response back, perfectly okay. If you say back, hey, Layla, I need to get on a call, I got something that I really need to talk about, we're scheduling that time within 48 hours. So I have specific practices that I put in place to keep myself accountable, because we know that when the going gets tough, some of these routines and some of these practices are the first things that go out the window, because we just literally, I can't access that better version of myself. And so I put these systems in place so that I can stay accountable to showing up the way that I want to, and not the way that circumstances allow. So
yes, Tuesday I interviewed Gina, who is the CEO of Mighty Networks. Mm-hmm. And on several for-profit boards. And I said to her, what's the thing that's influenced you the most about great leadership? And she said, response time. So you're on the right track as her. So let me ask you, are you mentoring anybody who's older than you?
I would say, so we're talking about reverse mentoring, right? I would be hard pressed to call myself someone's mentor who's older than me. But yes, I do have, I can think of at least 3 people and these are people who were like my former bosses, for example, who do reach out to me. And it's really interesting because the nature of the conversation is, this is going on with my child, or there's this technology, how do I use it? Or what's going on with the social media stuff? And so similarly to how they gave of themselves, right? With no filter, I give of myself, right? And so I give them, the best that I can. And so, yes, the short answer to your question is yes. And I find that those relationships, there's one person in particular that I'm thinking about who's I call him my work dad. I haven't worked with this man since 10 years ago. But when I introduce him, he's my work dad. And whenever he has any questions, and he's come to me with some really personal things. And it's just an incredible honor to be able to just to pay that back.
Now, you've used a term I've never heard before, reverse mentoring. What does that mean to
That's how it sounds, right? So I wouldn't call myself a mentor, but maybe like a reverse mentor. Yes. So reverse mentoring is this idea that folks that are of earlier generation than me have something to learn from me, and vice versa. And so reverse mentoring is this concept. It's when the relationship, not the because it should be mutually beneficial all the time, but from a conceptual standpoint, when there is essentially mentoring that's happening in the other direction. And so to give you an example, let's think of folks who are serving Gen Z as a market, right? So you might be a very high powered executive, you've been in your career for 20 years doing great things, but are you familiar with why TikTok is so important? Maybe not so much. And so you might spend the time to have a mentor, essentially engage in a reverse mentoring relationship to help get some of those insights and to help develop a sense of empathy around things that might otherwise, like you might otherwise just not get because you don't have an ear to the ground as it relates to those things. Similarly with like technology and so when you think about values, right? When you think about values between different generations, right? It's different. It's different hearing what's important to someone from someone that you respect versus hearing it from someone who you don't know, right? And so if someone who you respect tells you, here's what's important. I know it sounds crazy, but this is really what it is. It's the message lands well and it actually has an impact. So the reverse mentoring piece is something that I would encourage. I would encourage folks to really like look into and start to build some of these relationships. It's how we stay relevant across generations and across different disciplines when we think about things going sort of like the other way than we expected them to go.
Mm-hmm. I think I have to have you as my reverse mentor.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let me know how I can help. I can help.
All right. We have a message from, I think it's pronounced Sienna. Hi, Sienna. And she's quoting me in terms of defining you: humility, smarts, and credibility. She wrote, yes, with an exclamation mark.
Thanks, Sienna. I appreciate that. I receive it. Thank you.
Tell us, what do you consider to be the most important aspects of your work at Amazon?
Let me take a second. There's so many things. I would say the most important element is really persisting. It's really, I hear you. If the answer is no, it's no for now, right? And this idea that, well, okay, I'll come back. So being relentless and truly continue to push and push and push. And sometimes you got to take a break. I'll be honest. I'm at that place right now. But if you can't necessarily be there in the fight all the time, it's how do I enable others to persist, right? So there's always a way that you can contribute to the persistence that's necessary. And so I would say that's probably the most important thing.
I love the fact that you just said sometimes you have to take a break. Mm-hmm. Because I think, especially with the more senior generation, we don't know how to take a break.
Yeah.
So how do you take a break?
So it varies. It depends on the kind of break that I need. I think in my career, I've taken breaks that look like taking a leave of absence, right? And essentially spending 3 weeks just doing things that energize me and fill up my cup. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, this idea that like if you think of your life as like a cup, you want to make sure that you're doing the things that are filling your cup and that you are serving others from the overflow. So essentially the things that might fall on the saucer, right? Mm-hmm. And so spending time filling up my cup for 3 weeks, or sometimes it's been like, to be honest, school was a great break. A break where I, when the objective was to really determine what other things excite me, what other things could I be interested in, and really spending some structured time exploring within the comfort of there's a structure here that like I'm going to graduate in 2 years, and so it's taking a break from one kind of work to do another kind of work. There's that break also. Then there's like breaks where it's just like self-care. So I mentioned earlier, I am an introvert. I'm also a highly sensitive person. And so what that means is that I need alone time. And it's not like, oh my God, I need alone time the way that like I need to sort of like, it's a I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a requirement. Like I need it to survive and to function. It's like the equivalent to like not having water or not having good like sleep. And so right. It's essential to me re-energizing. So those are more, I would say those are more frequent, and they take the form of like blocking time in my calendar, where it's like I know that 15 people want to meet with me right now, but if I can't show up for myself, I'm not going to be able to show up for you. And so just being unapologetic about protecting that time. And then there's also the fun sort of breaks, which I have a partner who I love to death and who is super energetic and extroverted. And so there's never a shortage of things that I could get into with him. We just got back from like a 16-day trip across the African continent. And that was pure fun. Pure fun. Also with the COVID travel situation, it was pure like problem solving when it came to getting to the airport and out of the airport. And so I was fully plugged in, and having a different focus in terms of, you know, where my energy was going helped to fill my cup up. So I came back to work energized. So those are different flavors of breaks, but I encourage folks to explore, you know, follow the energy, follow your curiosity, but really do take these breaks and be intentional about blocking the time. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because I just took my calendar 2 days ago and I said enough. Yes. And I put in blocks of time, because otherwise this book that I'm writing is not going to get finished.
I hear that. I am on the same train. There's a book that I started in 2020 that's still not finished. So that's next.
The biggest tip that I got a couple of weeks ago from a woman I interviewed about writing a book was, don't try to do it like you're eating an elephant in one bite.
Right.
Keep Post-it notes in every room that you walk into. And when an idea hits, write it up on the Post-it note. And then at the end of the week or month, gather all your Post-it notes, put them up on a board, and go from there. And that's exactly how Harry Potter was written.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to take that. I received that also. I'm going to go ahead and implement that one. I'm supposed to be getting back on the writing train this month, but you know, we got 3 days left, 4 days left. So,
all right.
We'll see.
Also, a writing accountability partner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. That makes me nervous just to think about.
Come on now.
I'll be honest. I'm one of these people, like and this is, y'all, I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just being honest and transparent here. I am learning to not let myself down, in the sense that like I am that person who you can count on to like be with you to do a workout if you need to, if you're trying to lose weight, without fail. But don't ask me to sit down and write from a blank page every day. Essentially, don't ask me to show up for myself in certain ways that I just can't do it. So it's a growth opportunity for me to really continue to show up in those ways. I can find a million things. Are you familiar with the term boondoggling? Which is, I mean, it's really just productive procrastinating. No. So yeah, so I'll do the dishes, I'll fold the laundry, I'll coach somebody, I'll do all these things to feel productive, but really I'm just distracting away from the fact that if traction is getting the book done, then it's a distraction, right? If we talk about it in terms of like the actual term. But yeah, that's what I'm guilty of that. So
Layla, you're a me.
I don't know what to do, but we'll see. I'll get better. Maybe you can show me your ways.
Okay, let's do it, as you said.
Yes.
Now, Sienna is writing in again. She said, powerful, every age and stage can teach each other. And then she writes in, you can do that. Something with the notes, features on your smart, I think she means your smartphone. So it's with you whenever, and you can cut and paste it into your book. But a napkin works too.
Okay, whatever you got.
I like this. Productive procrastination is sometimes when you get the biggest aha moments too. I like that.
It's true.
Now, I understand from my colleague that you needed to get approval to be on this show as an Amazon employee. What was that like? Why did you have to do that? I mean, I know the answer, but
It's just so it's a standard process. The general sort of impetus behind it is that Amazon wants to have a handle on where people are speaking on which days, to make sure that we're all sort of like on message, and that we are that they can handle if something goes awry. So in this particular case, they've simplified the process. I think historically where that comes from is wanting to be very cautious around where we're showing up with competitors and things like that, because
a
we just
competitor,
want
no competitor to Amazon. I'm sorry.
I mean, it depends. I think we do have competitors when we think about like cloud and like other retailers and things like that. And so there are some sensitivities there. And I, thankfully, if there isn't, and this is something that I've run into in other areas, if there are not competitors on, then it's fair game. It's fine, right? But we want to make sure that they're always wanting to make sure that they're being thoughtful and that we are prepared to represent well.
Did you feel put out by that?
Put out? What do you mean by put out?
Did you feel upset that you had to go and get permission?
No, I think that I understand from a broad standpoint that it's almost like, if you're in a family, right? We want to make sure that folks are speaking on brand, right? And essentially that the message is clear and that it is from the source in a way that is beneficial to others and also to the family, right? And so it makes sense to me. I think it was different, is what I would say. It was different for me, and I developed an appreciation for that. It was different because in other companies that I've been at, I could just show up and it wasn't a problem and there wasn't any concern. But then I've also been in places where if you're gonna show up somewhere, you've got to do some PR training, and it's like, I mean, how do you do this before every event? So I think it's a great sort of in between. From what I've experienced.
Do you have to do any PR training?
I mean, we have a general like compliance workshops around messaging and things like that, but not like that I had to sit down with someone and like go through the questions and role play or anything like that.
That's good, because I never know what questions I'm going to ask. So you can
right, I would have been wholly unprepared, right, for this one. And it's really the real sort of crux of why we have these policies in place is because Amazon and AWS are hosting like massive events. So we've got a reInvent, which happens at the beginning of the year, at the end of December of the year, and for those, we also want to make sure that we have a good balance of folks that are speaking to different disciplines, and that are the timely person to speak to a specific audience on a particular message. And so it's just really very strategic, like. It's a strategic organization, which I respect because I run my life that way. So I get it.
As we're closing, and I see we're out of time, unfortunately, what do you consider to be the most courageous thing you have ever done?
Oh, man. I often go back to quitting a job without having one lined up and just trusting that I would figure it out. And that happened fairly early in my career. So yeah, when I quit Wall Street, it was because I was like, I need all the space and all the energy to be able to figure out what's next for me. And so thankfully, I had the support of my grandmother that I was living with at the time. God bless her, rest in peace. And I had the support of my partners and all of my friends. I mean, some people did think I was crazy, but I would say that that's one of the most courageous things that I've done. I mean, there's also other related things, but yeah, I think for me, that's it.
Well, I think that you're an incredibly courageous woman.
Thank you.
And
I see that.
it's been a pleasure to interview you. And you have brought my energy up, because just before you came on, I said to my husband, I'm tired. I don't want to do this today.
Yay.
I am so glad that I did.
We've been chasing each other trying to do this for a while. I'm glad we finally were able to do it.
I think my favorite expression towards women that I really respect is that they're a kick-ass woman.
Yes, I received that. Thank you.
And
you're a kick-ass also.
Yeah, that.
Love it. I'm taking notes.
If I could help you at all in your career, please reach out. But I also want to say that Amazon should be so proud that they have you to represent them. You
Thank you.
did them good, as we say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I received that. Thank
Yeah,
you. It's an honor. It's a privilege. It's a privilege and an honor to do that.
I'm so excited about Amazon. And here's what you did for me with Amazon. I buy something, my husband says, "What did you buy today?" That's his standard question each
Mhm.
day from Amazon. I don't know. The box comes, it's like Christmas, right?
Right. Every time. Every
Yes,
time.
every time. So we're talking about taking down the Christmas tree. And I said,
Hmm.
oh, let me go on Amazon and get the things to hold the ornaments. And he's like,
Hmm.
okay,
Okay.
from a dad. But what you did for me today is you told me that Amazon represents my values. And there's nothing better than shopping at a store that represents your values. So thank you to you and thank you to Amazon.
Thank you. It is my pleasure, and I'm so grateful. Like I'm here because they represent my values as well. So, and I'm sure you've experienced in this discussion that like if it doesn't align, then it's not a part of my life. And so I'm grateful that I could bring that to you and also to others who are watching us.
And
It's
I'm
been
so
great.
grateful that you had the courage to think about what you wanted to do next
Yeah.
because you landed well.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, with that, everyone, I know, and you know that when I'm really enjoying a conversation, I don't look at the clock. I mean, what's that about? Time is just
Right.
a measurement that's out
It
there
is.
in space. So,
Yep.
as a result, we're running 3 minutes late, and that's just okay, right?
Mhm.
So, I hope you know, tune in on Tuesday.
Mhm.
Where I have another guest, and I never tell you who the guest is, but there's a new way that you can find out. If
Okay.
you subscribe to my newsletter on LinkedIn, it comes out the beginning of the month and it lists all the guests that I am going to be interviewing. So you have no excuse to miss somebody who's going to make a difference in your life through the courage they've displayed in their life, like Layla.
Thank you.
So, everyone, have a great weekend. It's coming up fast. We've got snow like crazy here in Colorado,
Amen.
and it's a beautiful thing. I love you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Follow me on LinkedIn, subscribe to the newsletter, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.
Bye bye.